The wind howled across the rocky valley, sharp and cold, carrying dust that stung like tiny knives against bare skin. The alien settlement stood in silence, its tall stone towers leaning like tired giants. At the center of the village, a small figure stood alone. Trembling, it was a child, her skin pale silver, her eyes glowing faintly with a light that made the elders uneasy. The council had gathered, tall beings with heavy robes and faces carved with harsh lines. They stared down at the child as if she were already gone. Their voices were firm, cruel, final. "She is cursed," one said. "She will bring ruin," another added. The decision had been made long before, and now the sentence was to be carried out. The child would be cast out, left to die in the wilderness. She did not fully understand why her people hated her. She only knew that since she could walk, others avoided her. When she reached out for kindness, they pulled away. When she laughed, they grew quiet. When she dreamed, her visions frightened them. She was different, and difference was danger in their eyes. The child clutched a small piece of cloth. The only thing she owned, it had once been her mother's. But even her mother was gone now, taken by illness. She looked around the circle of faces, hoping for one sign of mercy. But there was none. Even the younger ones, who once played with her, now looked away in fear. "Go," the elder commanded. His voice echoed through the empty streets. "Go and do not return." Her thin legs shook as she stepped away from the settlement. The heavy gates closed behind her with a deep metallic sound, sealing her fate. She was alone now, cast out into the world beyond. The land stretched wide and merciless. Red sand and jagged rocks cut the horizon. Strange cries of unseen beasts echoed in the air. The sky was filled with two moons, pale and cold. The child walked slowly, each step heavier than the last. She had no food, no shelter, no family, only fear and the unknown. As night fell, the temperature dropped. The warmth of the day vanished, replaced by biting cold. The child wrapped herself in the thin cloth, but it did little to protect her. She curled against a rock, shivering. Her stomach ached with hunger. Her throat burned with thirst. Tears rolled down her face, but even those froze on her skin. In the darkness, eyes began to appear. Dozens of glowing points surrounding her. They moved with slow, careful steps. Predators from the wild. Their growls echoed low and deep. The child's heart pounded. She pressed her back against the rock, her small hands trembling. She wanted to scream, but no sound came. Her mind replayed the last words of the elder. "Do not return." The words felt heavy like chains. Binding her to death, she closed her eyes, waiting for the creatures to strike, waiting for pain to come. But then something strange happened. The beasts stopped. Their glowing eyes flickered with hesitation, as if something beyond the child kept them back. The night grew silent, even the wind paused. The child opened her eyes slowly, confused. The creatures had vanished into the shadows, leaving only silence and her pounding heart. She did not know why they spared her. She only knew that fear would follow her wherever she went. The night stretched long, endless. She tried to stay awake, but her body was too weak. Slowly, her eyelids closed, and she drifted into uneasy dreams. In her dream, she saw flashes of light, great fires falling from the sky. She saw her people screaming, running, hiding. And then she saw herself standing tall, power glowing from her hands. A voice whispered in the dream, but she could not understand the words. It was not the voice of her people, it was something else, something distant yet close. When morning came, the child woke to the pale light of the twin suns. Her body was stiff, her lips cracked. She rose with effort, every bone aching, but she walked again, step by step. Because even though her people had cast her away, some part of her heart refused to give up. Far away on the edge of the horizon, a small figure moved. Unseen by the child, it was not alien. It was not like the others, it was human. And though they did not know it yet, their paths would soon cross, and nothing would ever be the same. The desert stretched wide and endless. The alien child wandered with heavy steps, her bare feet cut by sharp stones, her thin body weak from hunger. The twin suns burned overhead, pouring light that shimmered against the red sands. Every step felt like it could be her last, and yet she walked on, because to stop meant to surrender to death, far across the wasteland. A different figure moved, taller, stronger, dressed in strange gear of leather and steel. This was not one of her kind. His skin was darker, his eyes sharp, his movement steady like a seasoned traveler. He was a human, a wanderer who had crossed stars to reach this hostile world. He came seeking resources, old ruins, perhaps even forgotten secrets buried under alien dust. He did not expect to find life, much less a child, at first. He noticed only a small shadow in the distance moving unsteadily. He paused, watching. The figure was too small for a hunter, too weak for a warrior. Something about it stirred his curiosity. He lifted his old scope and looked closer, and what he saw made him frown. A child, stumbling, collapsing, rising again. He muttered to himself, "What in the void is a child doing out here?" The child finally fell. Her body too weak to go further. She lay still, the sun's beating down. Her breath shallow, dust clung to her silver skin, and her faint glowing eyes dimmed. The human lowered his scope. Debating with himself on a world like this, danger came in many forms. Was this a trick? Bait left to lure him into a trap. He thought of turning away, letting fate decide. Yet something in her fragile form held him still. The human walked forward, slow but steady. His boots crunched on the sand, his shadow growing long. The child heard the sound faintly. Her ears twitching, she forced her eyes open, and for the first time she saw a human. He looked strange to her, rough features, dark beard, eyes filled with something she did not understand. He knelt beside her, checking her pulse. Her skin was cold, her breath shallow. She was close to death. The child tried to speak, but no words came, only a weak sound like a whimper. The human pulled a small flask from his belt, tilting it carefully to her lips. Drops of water touched her mouth, and she drank greedily, choking but alive. He sighed, shaking his head. "You're barely holding on, kid," he said, though she could not understand the words. His tone, however, carried warmth she had never known. He lifted her gently, wrapping her in a cloak to shield her from the burning suns. She felt strange in his arms, heavy with exhaustion yet safe. The human glanced around, uneasy. The wilderness was never empty. Predators lurked unseen, and the night brought dangers worse than the day. He had to find shelter before the darkness returned. As he carried her, the child stirred. Her eyes fluttering, she stared at him with suspicion. Why had this creature saved her when her own people had cast her out? Why did his arms feel safe when hers had always felt cold and alone? She wanted to resist, to push him away, but her body was too weak. The human reached a ridge of rocks where caves opened into shadow. He chose one, small but defensible. He laid her down gently, making a small fire with practiced skill. Sparks lit dry brush, flames grew, and soon warmth filled the cave. The child watched, wide-eyed, firelight reflecting in her glowing eyes. She had never seen kindness before, never seen anyone work to keep her alive. The human offered her food, small dried rations from his pack. She hesitated, sniffing, suspicious, yet her hunger overcame her fear. She ate slowly, her glowing eyes never leaving him. He watched her too, curious. He had seen many species across the stars, but this one was different, fragile yet strange. As the fire crackled, he asked softly, "What happened to you, little one?" Though he knew she could not reply. For the first time since her banishment, the child felt something unfamiliar. Not comfort, not safety, but the beginning of trust still. Fear lingered. She wondered if he would abandon her once she was strong enough to walk again. Like her people had done, her heart guarded itself. Even as her body accepted his help, outside, the desert night awakened. Shadows shifted among the rocks. Glowing eyes appeared again. The same predators that had stalked her before. They circled the cave entrance, growling low. The human reached for his weapon, a long steel blade and a worn plasma pistol. He stood guard, firelight shining on his face. He did not back away, he did not run. He stood like a wall between the child and the night. The beasts tested the air, snarling, but they did not enter. The fire in the human's steady stance held them back. The child watched from the ground, her small hands gripping the cloth she carried. In her glowing eyes, something changed. For the first time, she felt what it meant to be protected. For the first time, she realized she might not be alone. The night stretched long, filled with distant cries and whispers of danger. Yet inside the cave, the fire glowed, and the human's shadow stood firm. The child drifted into uneasy sleep, her mind torn between fear and fragile hope. She did not know who he was or why he helped. But one thing was clear, her story was no longer hers alone. The fire burned low inside the cave. Soft orange light flickered across the stone walls. The alien child woke slowly, her small body stiff but alive. She looked around and saw the human sitting near the entrance, his weapon resting on his lap. His eyes sharp and watchful, he had not slept. Through the long night he had guarded her, never once turning away. At first she felt fear. This creature was strange, taller, stronger, completely unknown. Yet he had given her water, food, warmth. He had fought the night for her sake. The memory of her people's harsh faces returned. The cold voices that banished her. The human's presence felt different. Confusing, almost impossible to trust. She sat up slowly, clutching her thin cloth. Her glowing eyes fixed on him. The human turned his head, noticing she was awake. He gave a small nod, not smiling. But his voice was gentle. "You're tougher than you look." "Kid?" She did not understand his words. But she felt the tone. It was not cruel, not sharp, it was calm. He broke a piece of dried food and placed it near her. She eyed it with suspicion, hunger twisting inside her. For a long moment she hesitated, watching him. Then she reached out with shaking fingers and took it, nibbling slowly. Her eyes never left his face, as if waiting for betrayal. He did not move closer, he did not force her. He simply let her eat. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the crackle of fire. The human finally spoke again, more to himself than to her. "You've been left out here to die, haven't you?" His voice carried weight. A kind of sadness. He had seen this before on other worlds. The weak cast out, the unwanted left behind. It stirred something deep within him. The child lowered her gaze. She did not know his words, but she felt the meaning in his tone. Tears welled in her glowing eyes. She quickly wiped them away, ashamed. The human noticed but said nothing. He simply looked back at the cave mouth. Keeping watch, hours passed and the day outside grew bright. The child slowly gathered strength. She stood on weak legs and moved to the cave's edge. Peeking at the wide desert beyond, the human followed her with his eyes. Cautious, she stepped outside, the suns warming her silver skin. The world looked endless, too big for her small frame. A gust of wind nearly pushed her back. She swayed but did not fall. The human rose and joined her. Standing a short distance away, together they looked at the horizon. He pointed toward the west where jagged mountains broke the line of sand. "Shelter there," he muttered. He spoke to himself again, but she caught the motion of his hand, the direction of his gaze. She understood they would travel when they began walking. The bond between them tested itself. The human walked with long strides. Steady and sure, the child lagged behind, small steps sinking in the sand. She grew tired quickly, panting. He slowed his pace without complaint. Letting her catch up, she noticed. And though she said nothing, something warmed inside her chest. As they traveled, dangers followed. Once a shadow swooped from the sky, a great winged beast with talons sharp as knives. The child cried out, stumbling. The human reacted swiftly, drawing his pistol and firing a crack of light into the air. The beast shrieked and veered away, vanishing into the clouds. The child stared in awe, clutching her cloth. The human turned to her. "You're safe," he said firmly. She did not know the word, but she felt the promise. At night they camped again, this time beneath a broken pillar of stone. The human set another fire. The child watched carefully, learning how he struck sparks, how he placed wood and dry grass. Her curiosity began to overcome her fear. She edged closer, reaching toward the firelight. He noticed and quietly shifted so she could see better. He did not push her away. Later she tried to mimic him. Picking up a stick and holding it like his blade, she swung clumsily at the air. Almost falling, the human chuckled softly. Shaking his head, he guided her hands, showing her how to grip, though he kept the blade itself far from her reach. For a moment her eyes brightened, a spark of joy breaking through her guarded fear. Still, trust was fragile that night when the fire grew low. The child woke suddenly, hearing footsteps outside. She thought the human had abandoned her. Panic gripped her heart. She rushed to the cave mouth, ready to cry, but there he was, only a few steps away, gathering wood. His shadow moved calm and steady. When he returned, he gave her a questioning look. She turned away quickly, embarrassed, but relief flooded her heart. The days blended into nights. The two travelers shared silence more than words, but within that silence grew a bond, fragile like glass, yet stronger with each step. The child no longer looked at him with only fear. She began to watch him with quiet respect. The human, hardened by years of wandering, found himself softening, protective, but danger still lingered, for in the distance, unseen by them both, eyes watched. The alien tribe had not forgotten the child. Hunters moved across the sands, tracking, waiting. The fragile bond that had begun to form would soon be tested by fire. The desert winds carried whispers, sounds that did not belong to the storm or the shifting sands. The human noticed them first, faint traces of movement behind the rocks, small shadows that followed from a distance. He did not speak, but his hand rested closer to his weapon. His instincts told him they were no longer alone. The alien child walked beside him, her small steps uneven but determined. She did not notice at first, her glowing eyes fixed on the endless horizon. When the wind shifted, she heard it too. A sharp cry carried through the air. Not the cry of a beast, but of hunters. Her heart froze. She knew that sound. It was her people. They had come. Fear took hold of her legs. She stopped in the sand. Shaking her head, the human turned. Studying her pale face, her lips moved. No words came. Only a broken whisper. He understood enough. Danger was close. From the ridge above, dark figures appeared. Tall aliens cloaked in armor of bone and metal. Their eyes glowed faintly like hers, but filled with hate. They carried spears and jagged blades, weapons designed to wound and finish. The child's own people had sent hunters to erase her. To complete the banishment with blood, the human stepped forward, placing himself between the child and the hunters. His pistol gleamed in the light, his stance steady. The hunters called out in their language, voices sharp, demanding. The child understood. "Give her up, she must die, she is cursed." Her small hands clutched at the human's cloak, pulling, begging him to leave her. She believed he would, after all. Even her family had abandoned her. But the human did not move aside. His voice was calm but cold. "You'll have to go through me." Though they could not understand his words, the message was clear. The hunters spread out, circling like wolves. Sand shifted under their feet, spears raised, blades catching the sun. The child trembled, her glowing eyes filled with terror. But the human did not waver. He fired once into the air, a blast of light that cracked across the desert. The hunters stopped, cautious. They had never seen such a weapon, still they were many. The first charged with a scream. Leaping forward, the human sidestepped, striking with the butt of his pistol. The alien fell hard into the sand. Another came from the side, and the human's blade flashed, sparks of blood staining the ground. The child gasped, clutching her cloth tighter. The fight was brutal, swift. The human was skilled. Every movement sharp, precise. But numbers pressed hard. The hunters attacked in waves, shouting. The child watched, frozen, her heart pounding. She wanted to run, yet her legs would not move. She wanted to scream. But fear strangled her voice. Then it happened. A hunter broke past the human's guard, charging straight for her. His spear aimed at her chest. The child's eyes widened, her breath stopped. Something deep inside her snapped. A surge of light burst from her small hands, unseen and uncontrolled. The spear shattered into dust before it touched her. The hunter was thrown back. Crashing into the rocks, the battlefield froze. Even the human turned, staring in shock. The child stood trembling, glowing light spilling from her palms. Her eyes burned brighter than ever. She did not understand what she had done. Fear and power twisted together inside her. The hunters recoiled, muttering curses. "She carries the storm," one growled. The human's gaze softened. He understood now why she had been cast out. Her people feared this power, not because it cursed her, but because it was greater than theirs. He stepped closer, putting a hand on her shoulder, steadying her shaking frame. "It's all right," he whispered, though she did not understand. The tone calmed her. The hunters hesitated, rage mixed with fear. They wanted to strike, but now they knew she was dangerous. Their leader snarled, raising his blade, pointing toward the two. The hunt was not over. They would return stronger. In greater numbers, the human knew this too. He could not fight them all, not forever. He took the child's hand firmly, pulling her away. Together they ran across the desert, leaving behind broken spears and blood-stained sand. The hunters followed, shadows stretching across the dunes. The chase had begun. The desert itself became an enemy. Winds rose, carrying sand that cut into their skin. The child stumbled, but the human lifted her, carrying her through the storm. Behind them, the hunters' cries echoed. Closer, closer. At last they found refuge, an ancient ruin half buried in the dunes, towering stones carved with symbols worn by time. The human dragged her inside, shadows swallowing them. The hunters' voices faded outside, searching, circling. Inside the ruins, silence reigned. The child collapsed, exhausted. her glowing eyes dimming. The human crouched beside her. His breath heavy, his mind raced. This child was no ordinary outcast. She was something more, something powerful. Perhaps something the universe itself had not yet decided to accept or destroy. The child looked up at him weakly, her small hand gripping his for the first time. She did not see herself as cursed. For the first time, she felt worth saving. But the hunt was not over outside. The hunters marked the sand with signs calling for others to join. The desert would soon swarm with blades and spears, and deep inside the ruins something ancient stirred. Waiting for them both, the ruins were silent. Ancient stones rising like broken teeth from the sand. The human guided the child deeper inside, his torchlight flickering across walls carved with symbols older than memory. The air was heavy and cold, different from the burning desert outside. Dust clung to every surface, and the silence pressed on their ears. The child walked slowly, her small hand brushing against the stone. Her glowing eyes seemed to shine brighter in the darkness. She felt something stir within her chest, a pulse that matched the rhythm of the ruins. It was as if the place itself recognized her, calling to her in whispers she could not understand. The human noticed the change in her. He saw how her steps grew steadier, how her fear gave way to strange curiosity. He kept his weapon ready, but his eyes lingered on her. He wondered again, who was this child? What was she becoming? They entered a wide chamber. Its ceiling cracked open to reveal the pale light of the moons. In the center stood a great stone table, marked with lines that glowed faintly as the child stepped closer. She froze, staring at the light that answered her presence. Her hands shook, but she could not turn away. The human touched her shoulder. Caution in his voice. "Careful," he said. Though she did not know the word, the child reached out slowly, her small fingers brushing the stone. A surge of energy rushed through her. Her eyes flared with bright light. Symbols on the walls lit up one by one, glowing like stars. She gasped, pulling her hand back. But the light did not fade. Instead, it spread, filling the chamber with a warm glow. Images appeared across the walls. Shifting like smoke, the human stared in awe. He saw visions of a world burning, of ships falling from the sky, of armies clashing in endless war. The child trembled, her eyes fixed on the visions. She saw herself older, standing tall among flames, her hands shining with power. Her voice echoed in the vision. Though she could not understand the language, it filled her with fear. Was this her future? Was she meant to destroy? The human stepped closer, placing himself between her and the visions. He looked at her, his eyes steady. "You are not what they fear you to be," he whispered. Though she could not understand, she only heard the calmness in his tone, a calmness that anchored her trembling heart. But outside, the hunters had not given up. Their cries echoed through the desert as more arrived. They surrounded the ruins, their torches burning, their blades gleaming. The child heard them and clutched the human's cloak, panic rising again. The visions had shown her destruction, and now her people wanted it fulfilled. The human tightened his grip on his weapon. He could fight, but he could not hold forever. He looked back at the glowing walls, hoping they held answers. The symbols shifted again, revealing a figure tall and strange, holding a small child with glowing eyes. The figure looked human, though not fully. The child stepped closer, her breath catching. Could it be? Was this ruin tied to her origin? Her heart pounded as the whispers grew louder. Words pressed into her mind, though no mouth spoke them. Chosen, bridge, danger, hope. They came in fragments, broken pieces of a puzzle too large for her to see. She covered her ears, shaking her head. The human caught her before she fell, his arms strong, grounding her. Then her power flared again, uncontrolled. A burst of light shot from her hands. Striking the ceiling, rocks crumbled, dust fell. The hunters outside shouted in fear. Some fell back, but others pressed forward, determined to kill what they called a curse. The human pulled the child back, shielding her. His mind raced. He realized her power was tied to this place. She was not simply an outcast. She was connected to something vast, something hidden for centuries. He looked into her frightened eyes and saw not a weapon, but a child who wanted only to live. "Listen," he said firmly. Though she did not know his words, his voice carried strength. "Your power is not your enemy." She blinked at him, uncertain, but his tone soothed the storm in her chest. Her glow dimmed, slowly under control. The hunters broke into the ruins. Their leader stepped forward. Blade raised, his voice rang with fury. "She must die." The child shrank back, But the human stood tall, his pistol aimed, his blade ready. He would not surrender her, not to fear, not to hate. The glowing walls pulsed brighter. The chamber shook as if alive. The hunters froze for a moment, fear flashing across their faces. The child felt the whispers again, softer this time, guiding. Not overwhelming. She raised her hand and the glowing symbols bent toward her. Surrounding her with light, the hunters roared and charged. The human braced himself for battle. But something new was awakening, the fragile bond between them. The mystery of the ruins, the secret of her power, all of it was leading to a choice neither of them yet understood. The chamber's light spread into the desert, a beacon across the night. Every eye turned toward it, allies and enemies alike, and in that moment, the child was no longer only an outcast. She was something far greater. Something her people had feared, something the human had chosen to protect. The ruins shook as the hunters stormed inside, their blades glinting in the pale glow of the walls, the air filled with the sound of steel scraping stone, their cries rising like a storm. The human placed himself in front of the child, his pistol steady, his blade drawn. His eyes burned with determination. He would not let them pass. The child clung to his cloak, her glowing eyes wide with terror. The whispers of the ruins still pressed against her mind, urging her to rise, urging her to unleash what she carried. But fear gripped her heart. If she lost control, she might destroy everything, even him. The hunters circled, their leader raising his jagged sword. "She is cursed," he roared. "Her power will end us all." His words rang with hate. His people believed it. They had come not only to kill the child, but to erase her from memory. The human fired. A flash of light struck one hunter, dropping him to the ground. The rest charged, screaming. The clash began. Steel met steel, sparks flew. The human fought like a wall, every movement sharp and practiced. His blade cut, his pistol roared, but there were too many. They pressed harder, wave after wave. The child trembled, watching him bleed. He was fast, strong, but not invincible. A cut across his arm, a strike to his side. His breath grew heavy, yet still he stood. He fought not for himself, but for her. The thought shattered her fear. Her small hands shook, glowing brighter. The symbols on the walls pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. She felt the power rising, wild and burning. She whispered a soundless cry, and light burst from her. A shockwave threw hunters backward, slamming them into the walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. The hunters scrambled, some in fear, others in rage. "The storm awakens," they cried. Their leader pushed forward, striking at the human with fury. Blades clashed, sparks lit the chamber. The human staggered but struck back, sweat and blood covering his face. The child's eyes burned like fire. She raised her hands again, streams of energy pouring out, blasting stone and air. The hunters tried to rush her, but her power hurled them away. She screamed, not in words but in raw force. The chamber itself trembled. The human turned, his eyes meeting hers. He saw her drowning in the light, losing control. "Stop!" he shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the roar of energy. He ran to her, grabbing her shoulders, shaking her, his words fierce, his tone unbroken. "You are more than this. You can control it." She did not understand the words, but his eyes, his strength, his refusal to abandon her cut through the storm. Her power faltered, dimming for a heartbeat. In that pause, the hunters struck again. The leader lunged, his blade aimed for her heart. The human threw himself between them. The blade cut deep into his shoulder. Blood spilled. He staggered but did not fall. His pistol fired point blank. The leader crashed to the ground. The child gasped, staring at him. Her small hands pressed against his wound, tears flooding her glowing eyes. He winced but smiled faintly, shaking his head. "Not yet," his voice rough. The hunters froze at the sight. Their leader fallen, their prey blazing with power. Then the chamber itself roared. The walls cracked, the floor split. The ancient symbols flared brighter than the suns. The ruin was alive, awakened by her power. The hunters stumbled back in fear. Some fled into the desert, crying out that the curse had risen. Others tried to fight, but the light blinded them. The child stood tall now, trembling but unbroken. Her eyes burned with steady glow, not wild chaos. She held the human's hand with one of hers, and with the other she lifted toward the hunters. Light poured out, not destructive but forceful. Pushing them away, her voice, small yet firm, rang in the chamber. She spoke their language. No more. The hunters froze, shock in their eyes. The cursed child had spoken not as a monster, But as one who commanded, the power surged, lifting them and casting them from the ruins. The ground shook as the entrance collapsed, sealing them outside. Silence followed, broken only by the human's heavy breathing. The child turned back to him, his face pale, blood dripping from his wound. She fell to her knees, pressing her forehead to his chest. Sobbing without words, he weakly lifted his hand, resting it on her silver hair. "You're stronger than you know," he whispered, his voice barely there. She felt his warmth even through the pain. The chamber glowed softer now, the symbols dimming. The storm of power had passed, leaving only the bond between them. Fragile but unbreakable. The hunters were gone for now, but the war between fear and hope was not finished. The child understood her path had only begun. Together they sat in the ruins, the human wounded, the child holding his hand tight. Outside, the desert was silent, but far away the sound of horns carried. The hunters would return with greater force. The final choice lay ahead, a choice only the child could make. The ruins lay quiet after the storm, broken stones glowing faintly, dust drifting down like falling stars. The human sat against the wall, his shoulder bleeding, his breath heavy. The alien child knelt beside him, clutching his hand, her glowing eyes filled with worry. She had driven the hunters away, but she knew they would return stronger, angrier. The whispers of the ruins still hummed in her head. Soft but steady, they no longer overwhelmed her. They guided her, showing paths of light and shadow, futures not yet decided. In one vision she saw herself alone, burning worlds with her power. In another she saw herself standing with others, protecting instead of destroying. Both visions were possible, but only one could be chosen. The human's voice broke her thoughts, low and rough. "You have to decide," he said. Though she barely understood, his tone was clear. He was telling her that the choice was hers. Not the hunters, not the elders, not even his. She looked at him, confused, trembling. How could a child choose the fate of a people, of herself, of everything? Outside, the sound of horns grew louder. The hunters were calling reinforcements. Torches glowed across the dunes like a river of fire closing in. The child felt her chest tighten. Fear screamed that she should run. Power whispered that she should fight. But the human's steady eyes told her something else. "You are more than what they say you are," his gaze seemed to say. She rose slowly, her small frame glowing with faint light. She walked to the center of the chamber where the great stone table still pulsed. Her hands hovered over it. The ruins answered, glowing brighter. Filling the room with warmth, her heart pounded. The whispers turned into one clear voice. "Choose your path." The hunters entered again, their new leader roaring, "End her." Before the storm consumes us all, they raised their blades, charging. The child turned. Her eyes glowing bright, she lifted her hands. And the hunters froze, not because of her power, but because of her voice, calm and strong. "I am not your curse," she said in their tongue. "I am not your enemy." The hunters hesitated. Their steps slowed, some looked at each other with doubt. Their belief in her curse began to crack, but their leader snarled, "Lies. She is the end." He raised his blade and charged alone. The human tried to rise, though weak, to protect her. But the child did not move aside. She stood firm, her light bursting. The blade shattered before it touched her. The leader was thrown across the chamber, landing broken. Silence fell. The other hunters lowered their weapons, fear and awe filling their faces. They whispered among themselves, "She is not death. She is chosen." Some dropped their blades to the ground. Their anger melted into confusion, into something close to respect. The child's glow dimmed as she lowered her hands, her small body trembling but unbroken. She turned back to the human, rushing to his side. His eyes were half closed, his wound deep. She pressed her hands against it, tears falling. Her power flickered, warm light spreading from her palms. It closed his wound slightly, not enough to heal fully, but enough to keep him alive. He looked at her with weak eyes, but a faint smile touched his lips. "See," he whispered, "you can save, not destroy." She did not understand the words, but she felt the truth in his tone. It filled her heart, stronger than the whispers, stronger than the fear. The hunters slowly backed away. Some bowed their heads, others turned and left. The ruins had witnessed her choice, and so had they. She had shown mercy when she could have destroyed. She had shown strength without cruelty. For the first time, she was no longer the cursed child. She was something more. The chamber grew quiet, the glow fading. The child leaned against the human, Her small body pressing to his, she whispered softly, not to him, not to the ruins, but to herself. I will not be alone again. Her voice was fragile but firm. The human rose with her help, limping. His strength was not gone. His spirit was not broken. He looked at her, the small alien child who had once been cast out to die, and saw not a burden but a companion. They had survived the hunt. They had faced the storm. They had chosen hope. Together they left the ruins, stepping into the desert as the suns began to rise. The sky painted gold and red. The hunters watched from afar, silent, uncertain of what they had witnessed. The child walked with her head higher than before. No longer trembling, her glowing eyes burned steady. The human walked beside her, wounded but unyielding. Every step forward was heavy, but it was also victory. Behind them lay the ruins, the whispers, the blood and the fear. Ahead of them stretched the unknown, endless and vast. For the first time, the child did not fear the unknown. She had chosen, she had found trust. She had found someone who would not abandon her. Her story was no longer one of exile. It was the story of a fragile bond turned unbreakable, of power turned to protection, of two souls from different worlds walking together into whatever came next. And though the desert was wide and the dangers many, they walked on, step by step, not cursed, not broken, but free.